Very good. As Hashem, today's daf is Masechta Bava Metzia daf Yud Tes, and we're beginning from the last line of daf Yud Ches, Amid Yud Ches Amid Beis.
Geht novum,
Good novum, jetzt ungeheiben. Halt Masechta Bava Metzia daf Yud Tes, halt the letzte sheet. Yud Tes. Okay. Yeah, Yud Tes. And we're starting from the Yud Ches Amid Beis, the last line. Zug the Heilige Gemara. Gemara says like this: Rabba Bar Bachana, a story. The Gemara starts off with a little masala. Rabba Bar Bachana, irkas legita be midrasha. It's unbelievable. He was a shliach for a get, and he lost the get. He was supposed to give the get to a lady, and he lost it in the base medrash. Okay, so you get an idea. So some of the boys in the yeshiva found the get. But now, remember, when you find the get, you're not supposed to return it to the shliach so fast. Because maybe if the shliach says, this is my get, I lost it, how do you know? Maybe this belongs to somebody else with the same name, and you're going to use this get to divorce somebody, and it's a pasal get. It would be written l'shloi l'shma for the person you want to give it to. So Rabba Bar Bachana lost this get in the base medrash. Amar, we're going to make it bigger a little bit. Amar, he said to the people, the yeshiva boys that found it, Isamana Islay Begave. If there's a siman on the, I have a siman, albeit not a great siman. I can give you a siman that the get was lost by me, fine. But itvius eina, if you trust me, I recognize that this was the get that I lost. Islay Begave. Because I recognize the handwriting on this get, the shape of the get, the length and the width. So you'll trust me that I recognize it. So the yeshiva boys, ahadru and nahalei, they returned it back to Rabba Bar Bachana. Now, Amar, so Rabba Bar Bachana said to himself, Lo yadana, I'm not sure why they returned it to me. Imishim simona ahadru nahalei, is it because I gave them a simon? Now, I didn't give them a great simon, but if you hold the kasavre, this yeshiva held simonim daraisa, that you with simonim, it's minat Torah. If a guy says, I lost something, gives you even a shvacha, not such a great simon, midaraisa, you return it to him. So that's why they accepted my little weak simon that about this get, and they returned it to me, because this yeshiva held simonim is the raisa. Because if they held simonim was an invention of the Rabbanim, then you would have to need a super duper good simon called the simon muvhak, which means, let's say you'll say, oh, there was a hole by this letter in the get or the document. But he gave only a little simon, and they returned it to him. So maybe this yeshiva held simonim is the raisa. Maybe they returned it to me because I recognized it, and they trusted me. So the Gemara says, V'dafka, this only works, a good rabbi, like a trustworthy person, then we can trust him saying, oh, it was mine, accept my word to it. But a regular person, we won't trust him until he gives a simon. So Rabba Bar Nachama was not sure why they returned it to him. Maybe they returned it to him because he's a trustworthy person. So Gemara says like this, Kufa, we learned before, Matzah get Isha b'shik, if you find a get Isha in the street, you find a get in the street. Bisman shahabal moed, if the husband says, oh yeah, I gave this get to my wife, give it to her, yachzer, then you give it to her. Leisha, you give it to the woman. Eina bal moed, but the husband says, oh, I never gave this get, it was just written up, but I never gave it to her. Lo yachzer, lo lezev, lo lezeh, you don't give it to the woman, and you don't give it back to the husband because it's maybe it's a get that you can't use anymore. So the Gemara says like this: Bisman shahabal moida. But if the husband agrees that he gave this get to his wife, mi yachsel isha, you would give it to the woman. Now maybe it's a pasal get. Why would it be a pasal get? V'leichesh, let us concern. Once you find the get on the floor, nobody really loses a get on the floor. So why was this get on the floor? Why was this a lost get? Must be something was wrong with this get. So v'leichesh, let us be concerned. Shema kasav litem benisan. Maybe the get was written in Nisan time, but he never gave it to his wife till Tishrei. So it really, the date is off on this get. And therefore it was a pasal get, and he was too cheap to hire another sefer to write a get. So what's wrong with a get mukdam? Besides being a pasal get, it'll be simply, if the date is off on a get, you'll have a problem like this. V'azal bal zabin pera minisim b'atishri. You know, the husband eats called nichsei milug. If the woman has a property belonging to the woman, the husband has a right to enjoy fruits of that property. Let's say it's a tree, so an apple tree. So the husband has a right to eat from that apple tree as long as they're married. So the husband ate from the apple tree and then sold the apples from Nisan till Tishrei. Now, what she's gonna, if she receives this get that says she's divorced from Nisan, the kosa benisan, she's gonna pull out the get that was written in Nisan, and really the husband had no right to sell any of the fruits. And it's going to come out that the woman will be able to repossess things that were sold not according to the halacha. In other words, she has no right for that because really, the husband only had that was really married to her till Tishrei, even though the get says the month of Nisan. Gemara says like this: all this fits very well, according to the opinion. If a man puts his eye and announces he's divorcing his wife, shuv ain't al bal peres, then the husband has no right to eat fruits. So even if you didn't divorce your wife, if you announce that you're going to give her a divorce, so right away in Nisan, he had no right to that peres, shaper. Then it makes all perfect sense because she could repossess those fruits that the husband sold, even though the actual get was not given to her till Tishrei, but the husband had no right to eat fruits already from Nisan time because he was making it public that he's divorcing his wife. So that everything stims according to that opinion. According to the opinion, Yesh Labal Peres Achas Nasina, that although a husband announces that he's divorcing his wife, he still has a right to eat the fruits until the actual giving of the get. That's the husband's right. So therefore, the husband really had the right to sell those fruits from Nisan time. So, but if she actually received the get in Tishrei time, comes out that the husband had a right to sell those fruits that he ate in Nisan, from Nisan till Tishrei. And then she's going to repossess it by showing a get, telling everybody, hey, I was divorced already in Nisan, but really she's not divorced until Tishrei. How are you going to square this off? And says the Gemara, a beautiful teretz. When she's going to come to collect from what her husband sold from Nisan to Tishrei, we're going to tell her, you have to prove again, really, I trust. When do you actually receive the get? Yes, there's a date on this get that says Nisan, but really, you got to prove it once and for all when you actually receive this get. Bring a no set of Eidim that you actually received the get in Nisan. And if you don't prove that, then we'll assume that you didn't get the get in Nisan, and therefore you can't repossess fruits that your husband sold. Because, again, once a get is on the floor, it's like opening a can of worms. You start questioning if it's a kosher get, if it's not a kosher get. So any question that you want to use the get to repossess items that the husband sold, if this get was found on the street, so then there's something that may have been wrong with this get, and we have all these concerns. Now the Gemara says, if this is an idea that you could always ask the guy, prove when you receive the document, what about that looks like a good advice. So why don't we apply that advice from a regular loan document? And look what we say by a loan document. You see, by get isha, we return the get isha, but by loan document, we're not returning it. The Tanakh we learned in the Mishnah, if you find a loan document on the floor, and in the loan document gives the right to the lender to foreclose on properties that were sold by the borrower after the loan was made, don't return that loan document to the lender. And we really established that Mishnah. The borrower says, yes, I did indeed make a loan, and this loan document is valid. Why? Why don't we return it if the borrower says it's a valid loan document? Because the answer is mishum shekasav lil v'ispanism. Perhaps the loan document, once it's on the floor, again, it's like a can of worms. We start raising concerns. Maybe the document says that the transaction occurred in Nisan, but the transfer of money didn't happen until Tishrei, and therefore you're giving the lender the right, the katarach lekuchish like it did. He can go after and foreclose sold items that the borrower sold already from this time, even though the loan didn't actually take place on Tishrei. So therefore, if you find such a loan document, don't return it to the lender. So the Gemara is asking, why not? Hasam nami had to return it to the lender. If the lender is going to come to foreclose on properties that were sold by the borrower, name alay, we're going to tell the lender, bring me a proof when you actually received the shtar. And when did you actually make the loan? Put it that way. When did you receive this loan document that you actually, the transaction occurred? And if he can't bring it, then we won't allow him to foreclose. And yet, the Mishnah says we don't use that idea. We say no matter what, lo yachzir, don't return the loan document to the lender. By not returning the loan document to the lender, by the way, now you're telling the lender you can't collect anything. He has no loan document. At the very least, if you allowed him to return it, he won't foreclose on properties, but at least he would get whatever the borrower still has in his bank. But we don't allow that because of this problem. So why not? So the Gemara says, Amre, the answer is Hacha. Over here, Gabe get Isha, by get Isha, which we return to the woman. Even though a problem could come that the woman's now going to collect on items her husband sold, also lekeach utava. Then the purchaser who bought the items from her husband is going to have a claim. Wait a second, not so fast, lady. Amra, he's going to say, your get was lost. So why did the rabbis give you back a get? You threw it on the floor. Why was it found on the street? They wanted you to have the get, so you're allowed to get married. So now, if you want lemitref, now that you're using this get to start collecting items that your husband sold, right? You'll have to prove again exactly when the get came into your hand. I'm going to assume that the get, even though it says one date on the get, perhaps you only received the get much later, and therefore you have no right to collect from me items that I bought off your husband, fruits that I bought off your husband, because your husband had a right to those fruits because he only divorced you much later. But that only works by a get isha. Hacha, by a loan document, when a lender is trying to repossess items sold by the borrower, the purchaser will not come back to collect. Why? He's not going to come back. The purchaser of the property is not going to be able to say. He's not going to have the courage to say something against the lender, because he'll say like this: I know that this loan document was found on the street, but they returned it to you anyway. They returned this loan document back to the lender. Pshita, it must be why did they return it back to you? Something may have been wrong with this loan document, and nevertheless they returned it back to the lender. Lemitrefhu, it must give you the right to collect, even from items that were sold, even from property that was sold after the date of the loan document, because Shmami no Kamir Rabbanim b'Milsa, that it must be that the rabbis really looked into, investigated the matter, and therefore in other words, before I purchased this property from the borrower, you already made that loan, and this date is a valid date on the loan document, and therefore he's not going to say anything. And just the fact that the lender is holding on to this loan document will give him a right to collect from something that maybe he had no right to foreclose on. So therefore, we don't return loan documents that have this clause in them that give the lender the right to go after items that were sold by the borrower if this loan document was found on the street. Now we go to a new Gemara. Shechrure Evodim. You found a emancipation, a freedom document that belonging to a slave. You find it on the street. Don't give it to the slave. Don't let him go free. You find a freedom document in the street. So, if the master says, hey, I wrote this freedom document to my slave, then return it to the slave. If If the master says, hey, I never freed my slave, I wrote up this document, but I never actually gave it to the slave. You don't return it to the master, and you don't return it to the slave. Says the Gemara, but we established that if the master agreed, you do return it to the slave. Why do you return it to the slave? Let us be concerned. Maybe the master wrote this document in Nisan, but he didn't actually free his slave till Tishrei. And let's say the slave somehow found money and bought a property in Nisan, Tishrei. Now, according to the actuality that he only received the freedom document in Tishrei, therefore he was still a slave when he bought the property. Va'azal Rav and the V'zavdina, and the rabbi, the master came and he sold the property because really whatever the slave bought, he had no right because he was really a slave. He was really a slave. Now, then much later, the slave is going to bring out a get shichra. He's going to bring out this freedom document, the Kseb B'Nissen, that was written in Nissen. And the Qatar L'kucha Shleikadin, and he's going to try to collect the items that were sold by his master, not right. It won't be correct, because really he was a slave until Tishrei. The date of the document is wrong. So he was a slave till Tishrei. So when he found money and bought a property, it really belonged to his master. So his master had a right to sell it to somebody else. Now he has this document that shows he was a slave from Nisan. It's incorrect. He was really a slave until Tishrei. So therefore, don't return it to the Eved. So the answer is you don't, but you do return it to the Eved, despite the fact that I have this concern. So then this would all make sense that really the slave really went free in Nisan time, even though he didn't receive the document until Tishrei. But the fact that Adam signed on the document and the date of the document says Nisan, the Adam, so to speak, acquired on the slave's behalf his freedom, despite the slave did not receive the physical document until Tishrei. He's already a free slave from Nisan, so no problem can happen. It's very detrimental for an Evet to go out free, because now he's chayiv in mitzvahs. Now he can't be with his shevcha kanainis, and maybe he wants to remain like a goy. So really, until he has that freedom document, he's considered a slave. I have this concern. Maybe the date of the document is wrong. He only received it in Tishrei, and he's going to show a document that says Nisan time, and he's going to start collecting from items that his master stole on his behalf. That really belongs to him. And says the Gemara, when he brings when he starts with that, we're going to say, oh, this slave document, this freedom document was found on the street. You have to prove it to me that I don't trust this date on this document. You have to prove it to me when actually you received the document, the freedom document. Only then we'll consider you free at that moment, despite the fact the date is written in Nisan. Zog the Gemara. Daitiki matana. The Gemara is explaining that there are two types of ways to bypass Yerusha. Normally, when a person dies, he has to give Yerusha to his children. But sometimes you can give away a property belonging, and it won't go to Yerusha, to the kids. What's called a daitiki? It should really be established that no matter what, it should bypass Yerusha laws. In other words, it only works if a guy is on his deathbed. He's called a shchiv mara. That he's saying, when I die, my possessions belong to so-and-so, not to my kids. That's called a daitiki, but it only works for a shchiv mara. Matana, but a gift, a gift you can give even now. You can say that I'm giving you the gift of the property, and when I die, you can get the fruits of the property. So the Gemara just interrupts with an open parentheses and says, Alma the only way to give the gift to somebody of a piece of property is only if you give him the land now, and after death he can eat the fruits of the property. You can give a whole property with lock, stock, and barrel to somebody even when you're alive. So what's shot in the brisa by saying matan is limited by saying mayoim l'achamisa? Amar Abaya explained. Hachi kama. This is what the brisa meant. Ezehi matana baroshi kamat neshchimra deloikoni elachamisa. What is a gift, a matanis bari, which is like a nashchimra, that you don't acquire it until after death? So remember, when a shchivmara, when somebody's on his deathbed, gives a gift, the guy can't benefit from the field until after he dies. Well, you can give, as a healthy person, a gift to somebody, and he can't benefit from the property until after you die. When you say, when you say, I'm gifting you the land now, but only after I die, you can benefit from the fruits. Fine. So that was open, close parentheses. Now we learned in the Brisa that if you, and our Mishnah says that if you find that the Brisa, that the Brishna says that if he doesn't say, you don't return it. That if you find a star daitiki or matana shchivara on the street, you don't give it to the guy, to the recipient, because it was found on the street. Why did he lose it? But too, it's only because the gifter did not say give it to him. But if the gifter said give it to him, noisden, we will give it to the recipient because it was found on the street. What could be wrong, right? What could be wrong? He found a gift document on the street. The gifter says, yes, I meant to give it to this guy. Give it to him. Uraminu, but then I'll ask you a stira. Motza daitikis apotikois matonis. It says if you find a daitiki and a gift. This is the key words. Even though the gifter and the recipient both agree that it belongs to the recipient, you don't return it at all. So now this is a direct contradiction to our Mishnah. Our Mishnah implies that if the gifter says give it, you would give it. And here this Brisa says don't give it, return it. So Amar Ababa Bamama Loikasha, it's not difficult. We go to Amar Beis. It depends. Mas Nisan, our Mishnah, the Ketani that says that you return it, if the gifter says return it, Hamatunu Noisim is talking about B'shchiv Merah. The guy that wrote the document was a Shchiv Merah. He was on his deathbed. Now, here's the difference. When a Shchiv Merah writes something, right, that he's gifting something after he dies to so-and-so, he could change his mind even after the recipient received the document. See, once you give a gift to somebody, you can't take it back. But if you're a shchiv mara, you could always change your mind. So that's the key point. The bar mahadahu, you're allowed to change your mind. What could go wrong? Dilma kosva miikare lahai. Maybe he wrote the shchiv mara wrote that he's giving it to, let's say, Ru'uvein. Then he never gave it to Reuven. Then he wrote another document that he's giving it to Shimon. Now he regrets. Oh, why did I give it to Shimon? I want to give it to Reuven. So even if he gave it to Shimon as a matnas bari, less leipsait, there's no loss if you return the document back to Reuven, the Shchiv Merah document, right? By the way, in a Shchiv Merah document, it's written that he's writing this because he's dying on his deathbed. So, less like say that nothing could go wrong. The Chinafki Tarte, because if both pull out their documents, even though the Reuven's document has a date earlier, Basrai Sezachi, because the second one will win. The Hodabe Mekamaisa, because the first document, Reuven, was a Shchiv Merah document, and therefore, obviously, if he's gifting it to Shimon, he regretted giving to Reuven. With a Shchiv Merah, we allow you to change your mind. Even if he gave it to Shimon as a matna Shchiv Merah, there's no loss. The Basraisa Zochi, the second one will win. The Chodame Mekamaisa, because again, he retracted from the first guy, from Reuven. So that squares off the Mishnah. Kik Tony Basraisa, but the Brisa that says Afal Pi Shishtei Moedim LeYachzul Lezev Lezeh, with the Brisa strict, never return it. Even if they both agree this happened, that's talking about Bebori, that the document that was gifted to Reuven was when the person was healthy. The Lav Ba'mehedehu, once you give a gift to somebody, you can't, there's no backseas. The Amrinim, we say, Dilma Kasul Lahai Be'ikarav, Imam Le'avalei. First you wrote it to Reuven and then you never gave it to him. But then you wrote it to Shimon, and you gave it to Shimon. Now you're regretting giving it to Shimon. So now, you can't take it back from Shimon. I can't take it back from Shimon. I'm going to say like this. I really gave it to Reuven. And give it back to Reuven. Because now Reuven's going to have a document that says an earlier date. That's why you don't return this document to Reuven, because it may mess up, it may screw Shimon, because you're gonna take something that was gifted already to Shimon, and now he's lost, because Reuven now pulls a document that has an earlier date. And El Amrina, we say like this: Anan, you don't give it to Reuven. Maybe maybe you wrote this document, you never actually gave it to Reuven, and you gave the gift to somebody else, and now you're regretting it. If you really wanted to give it to Reuven, write up a new document and give it to Shimon. Why? The Yavet to give it to Reuven. The Yavet because if Shimon shows up, because you'll see Shimon's document is before Reuven's document. Write up a new document to Reuven. So again, the Bryce. Okay, we're gonna stop over here. Again, to square off the Brysa is talking about when they both were healthy. When they both are healthy, there could be a problem if you return the document to the recipient. The Mishnah is talking about when the person was on his deathbed. So then we just went through a little cheshbon that there's nothing wrong can happen if you return the document to the recipient. One thing to remember, it's very important, the difference between a gift document and a deathbed document is a gift document, once you give the document to the recipient, no backsies. A deathbed document, once you give it to the guy on the deathbed could say, you know what, I changed my mind. And that's the key to understanding this Gemara. Okay.
Where do we leave off?
Rav Zir said, you just squared off the Brisa in the Mishnah, that one is talking about a matnas shchimera, and one is talking about matnas bari. Both seem to be talking about a matnas shchimera. So they're both Brisa, the Brisa and the Mishnah, both talking about matnas shchimera. So your answer is not a good answer. Both the Brisa and the Mishnah are talking about a shchimera. One is dealing with himself, and one is dealing with the son. When the Mishnah says the guy on his deathbed said, "Give it to this guy, b'didei, it's his." The Ba'amahadabe, when he's on his deathbed, he can change his mind even after the recipient received the gift. He says, even if you actually gave it to somebody else, there's no loss. The kamo basar zochri. The second guy will always win. So if I return to the first guy of Reuven, Shimon's going to win. Because it's obviously you retracted from giving it to Reuven, and a Shchimera could retract to give it to Shimon. But when is the Brisa talking about? When does the Brisa say you don't return it to anybody? Is bebrei. In other words, really, the father gave it maybe to Reuven, we don't know, and then he died, and it was the son who gave it to Shimon. Now listen to the problem. Maybe the father wrote it to give it to Reuven, and then never gave it to Reuven. And after the father died, the son wrote to Shimon. So then we say like this. So then the son wrote it to Shimon. The oven LA, and you give it to, and he gave it to Shimon. The son actually gave it to Shimon. And now the son says, why did I give it to Shimon? So now the Saba highlight Metzia baby. I really can't take it back from Shimon because I gave him a real gift. I'm not the son is not on his deathbed. I'll say I'll say everybody. My father gave it to this person. To Reuven, this like you're going to give it back the days of Napak B'dei to Zachi, and now Reuven's going to extract it from Shimon because Reuven has a predated document to Shimon that the son had no right to gift it because the father already gifted to Reuven, and then once Reuven pulls it back from Shimon, secretly the son is going to split the property with Reuven. Therefore, we tell him, we're not giving you a new document to give to Reuven, this old document to give to Reuven. Maybe your father wrote it, but he didn't give it. And you really gifted it to somebody else, and now you're retracting. So you're trying to pull it out from Shimon because you're regretting the gift that you gave to Shimon. Ella, we tell you like this: if it's true that your father gave it to Reuven, write a new shtar that you're giving it to Reuven. Even if your father did not give it to Reuven, and you, before giving it to Reuven, you gave it to Shimon. Let's say there's no loss here. Because now Shimon is going to have the predated the predated shtar that it's his, because you're writing a new shtar that you're giving it to Reuven, which date is going to say that it's after Shimon. So therefore, there'll be no loss if that happens. If we tell you write a new shtar, but the old shtar will never let you give it back to Reuven. So ends this daf Yomi.